I cannot believe this. The Denver Broncos just scraped away a win, but it was probably in the most ugliest fashion that I have seen, not just this season, but in a long time for the Denver Broncos. They got the job done in London, but it was not pretty. It was stressful. It was rough, and it did not come easy. Welcome into Broncos Digest, everybody. Happy Football Sunday. A little bit of a different vibe as far as schedule and timing this week. It's 12:45 Central Time, 11:45 Mountain Time from wherever you're watching or viewing as far as catching up on all your Broncos news, and already done with today's Broncos game as the Broncos were across the pond, of course, playing the New York Jets in a London game over in Europe. And even though the Broncos got the win and improved to 4-2, it was brutal. Not a lot of high points at all. Not any, at least, that we're not already used to talking about in today's game. They narrowly lost, and if they lost, it would have been essentially the same reason that they've lost some other games this season, shooting themselves in the foot and not allowing themselves to find any opportunities to win the game themselves. And it would have been to essentially the worst team in the league. But like I said, they got it done. They got the win. That's kind of all that matters when you look at games like this. But either way, pretty rough watch coming from London this morning. The Denver Broncos not looking great against the New York Jets. We're going to dive into everything surrounding this game that happened this morning. But before we do so, I want to remind you guys to make sure that you're subscribed to Broncos Digest here on YouTube. Fastest growing source for Broncos news and updates and rumors and reports. Anything that's going on in the world of Denver Broncos football, we are covering it here at Broncos Digest. So if you're part of that 96% watching our videos and you're not subscribed, change that right now. Join the Broncos Digest family and help us continue to grow this channel. Also want to real quick shout out our co-host Sebastian Georgiev. If you joined his live watch along for the game this morning, thank you so much for supporting that as well. Successful live stream. If you were able to, like as I said, join Sebastian for the entirety of the game and watch along as he kind of gave his thoughts and reactions. We'll be doing a lot more of those throughout the remainder of the season. So thank you for tuning into that. All right, without further ado, let's dive into today's breakdown. Broncos narrowly scraped away from the still winless New York Jets, but it was not easy and not pretty. Only one touchdown and a lot of offensive struggle and a lack of offensive production for the Broncos. A lot of costly penalties as well. A holding call by Garrett Bowles in our own end zone cost us a safety, gave the Jets 2 points. We had to kick it away in that moment as well. That gave the Jets the lead, and it actually gave them 11 points. They kicked 3 field goals and then got the safety. The Broncos, of course, with a handful of field goals and a touchdown as well. But against essentially the worst team in the league, the 31st worst offense in the league, and a very inefficient defense and secondary in the New York Jets, I was expecting this game to be a blowout. I was expecting to see the offense get to kind of play around a little bit and like almost have some fun in this game. You're across the pond, you're in Europe, you're playing in London in front of a fan base you're not used to seeing. It's on national TV. Like I was expecting a bunch of big plays and kind of a similar vibe to the Bengals game where a lot of interesting and fun play calling and, you know, a dominant win. But instead, it was a frustrating game to watch. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. But at the same time, it was so boring. Like there was nothing going on offensively for either team. Bo Nix didn't have a single passing yard in the entire third quarter. It was just a very slow back and forth, punt after punt, zero production game between these two teams. I will say, good teams find a way to win even when they play poorly. That's what the Broncos did today, and we'll dive a little bit more into that later on. But we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of everything that was lacking offensively for the Broncos today. I thought this was a really good take. I cannot believe how pathetic the Broncos offense has been. I'm sick is what this person had to say about the Denver Broncos, and I honestly am in the same boat. If I wasn't, covering the game and, watching it to perceive in terms of helping with producing this episode and, watching it from a reporter / podcaster standpoint, I may have considered moving on and doing something else after the first half. It was very lack thereof in terms of anything going on for the Denver Broncos, especially offensively. So we'll dive into some offensive stats. Bo Nix today, he was 19 for 30, 174 passing yards, had a passing touchdown, didn't have an interception either, and he was sacked once late in the game. Obviously, looking at this without having watched the game or knowing what went on, like 19 for 30, not the worst stat line in the world, but under 200 passing yards. You should be well over 200 passing yards against the New York Jets, and there was zero offensive production. I don't know why it took so long for the Broncos to get things going. They were very slow offensively today. Not a lot of opportunity. Bo Nix still looked pretty comfortable in the pocket. Obviously, he's primarily a pocket passer, getting things off very quickly. A lot of really short, quick routes is the primary play calling and offensive style that Bo Nix is utilizing throughout the game, but not a lot of that today. We didn't really see much of that in terms of success for the Denver Broncos. And then you look at the Denver Broncos rushing. J.K. Dobbins, the RB1, 14 carries for only 40 yards. He had a pretty rough game. I will hand it to the New York Jets. I think the best defense they were playing was on the run coverage. They weren't allowing much yardage on the ground. Anytime J.K. Dobbins had the ball in his hands and we kept it on the ground, or even anytime that Bo Nix would throw like a swing pass right up the line of scrimmage to like an RJ Harvey or a Marvin Mims, the Jets would be on it immediately, and there was no room to get any sort of a gap and make any sort of a play. And so the run game was pretty rough for the Broncos today. And then you look at, Bo Nix, who had 24 yards and 5 carries. Evan Ingram had more yards than the RB2. A tight end had more rushing yards than RJ Harvey today. RJ Harvey had 2 carries for 4 yards. Jaleel McLaughlin, he got a carry as well and totally fumbled the bag on it. Not literally, like he didn't fumble, but it looked pretty poor. So the run game, it looked a lot like what it's looked like in past few years for the Broncos, which is pretty rough, so to say. And then looking at the receiving for the Broncos today, Evan Ingram, he had 5 receptions for 42 yards, no touchdowns. He was by far the best receiver or tight end, whatever you want to call it, best person playing offense for the Broncos today. Marvin Mims had two receptions for 30 yards, and then Nate Adkins, of course, had the sole touchdown for the Denver Broncos. That was a great play in the red zone. Courtland Sutton drew the safety toward the middle. It left Nate Adkins wide open on the far side to get into the end zone for a Broncos touchdown. But other than that, Courtland Sutton had 1 reception for 17 yards. Troy Franklin had 3 receptions. RJ Harvey getting utilized a little bit more in a receiver sense rather than a running back sense, despite only having a few rushing yards. He did have 4 receptions for 21 yards. So that was, I guess, a high point, so to say, about the way RJ Harvey played today. But just overall, almost nothing going on for the Denver Broncos offense. Very slow, very lazy offense. Not a lot of pass opportunity, a lot of 3 and outs, and just I would say we're lucky that if this had to happen at some point in the first 6 weeks, I'm very glad that it happened against the Jets, because if this was against any other team that is even slightly better than the New York Jets, I think we would have had a hefty loss given to us in this week 6 matchup. I think this is the worst game of the season for the Denver Broncos. And I know that's crazy saying that, considering they got a win anyways and they have 2 losses. But if you go back to those 2 losses, Denver didn't lose those games. They beat themselves up, even though they played really well for the majority of the game. This was a pretty much all-around terrible performance from the Broncos, and it's pretty unfortunate. But like I said, they were able to get the win, and that's what matters most. And once again, the continuous theme of the season, the Broncos defense is the reason that we won this game, the sole reason that we won this game. Maybe Will Lutz can be attached to why we won the game as well, because he did his job and he was consistent on every field goal that he had to kick. 9 sacks for the Broncos defense. That's the only nice thing that can be said about Denver's win against the Jets. An ugly, ugly, ugly win against the New York Jets. And in all honesty, the Broncos defense gave up 0 points today. All 3 field goals that the Jets kicked, they were put in poor field position by the special teams or the offense, twice in their own end. And then there was the 2-point safety off of the offensive foul in the end zone. All game checks should have been given to the defense unit and Vance Joseph. The Broncos defense once again carried Denver into this win. And sometimes defense wins football games, and that's a theme for the Broncos that has been pretty consistent throughout the season. But this game by far is the most defensive heavy win that the Broncos had all year. 99 sacks, 82 total yards allow, somehow only winning 13-11. The offensive penalties, specifically the one that gave the Jets a safety, out of control. They're going to lose games against teams that aren't the Jets, just like I said a few minutes ago, which is essentially everybody that's above the Jets, because not a lot of teams are worse than the New York Jets right now. Special teams put us in some really rough situations, and it has to be cleaned up. So overall, even though the defense came out really strong, Nick Bonito looked amazing today, had multiple sacks, and is continuing to make a case for potentially winning Defensive Player of the Year. But other than the defense having a really strong game and coming up clutch with some huge tackles and some huge sacks throughout the game, it was a pretty rough watch for the Denver Broncos today. All right, so looking ahead, right now the morning slate of games is going on. The Chargers are playing the Dolphins. I would guess that they're going to win that game, but I think they are actually down as it stands right now, but a lot of game left to be played. Fairly confident that they'd be able to get a win. But as it stands right now, the Broncos are in outright first place in the AFC West. After their win this morning, they are 4-2. The Chargers are 3-2 in the middle of their game. Chiefs are on a bye week, so whatever happens with the Chargers today, the Chiefs will stay at 2-3. So either the Chargers win, and it's once again an outright tie for first place in the division, or the Chargers somehow get upset by the Miami Dolphins, and the Broncos go into this off week with the outright first place spot in the AFC West. So depending on what happens in that Chargers game, we'll obviously keep you updated and, keep that conversation floating around as well. But nevertheless, the Broncos in outright first place right now against everybody else in the AFC West, even though the win that they had today wasn't exactly reflective of winning their division as it stands right now. So, like I said, I think one of the biggest themes in the NFL is good teams know how to win football games even when they play poorly. That's what the Broncos did today, despite a lot of costly mistakes and a lot of hurting themselves in this game and not necessarily losing and being beat by the Jets. They got it done. They got the win. And after a long travel week where they haven't been in Denver since before they left for the Philadelphia game, they get to come back home to the Mile High City, hopefully get right, get straight, and turn things around as we look ahead to some of the next few games that the Broncos have in the next few weeks. They've got the Giants next. That's going to be a tough opponent for sure. The Giants beat the Eagles after the Broncos beat the Eagles. And I mean, Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterby, that's a pretty nasty combination right now. And so if the Broncos are going to want to have a chance to win that game, they're going to have to pick up some of the slack and correct a lot of mistakes that they had in this game against the Jets. But like I said, they got it done. They got the win. So good job to them for that. They're 4-2, winning record with some cushion going into next week. Exciting stuff for the Denver Broncos. Thanks for tuning into Broncos Digest, everybody. As usual, we keep you covered with all things going on in the world of Denver Broncos football throughout the week and leading up to this next game that they have. In the meantime, enjoy your Sunday, enjoy your week. Go Broncos, and we'll talk to you guys soon.